I suppose I've always written, ever since I was a little girl at primary school. I remember writing a story about a rabbit, and I used to just write silly plays for my sister and me to put on. For my 5th birthday, my father gave me a big fat book of poems. I've still got it, actually, the book of 1,000 poems. And yes, I wanted to be a poet when I was 5 years old. That was my definite first ambition. I always loved reading and books, and one of my favourite authors was someone called Eleanor Fargen, very, very well-known children's writer. And I then discovered she lived not that far from me. And in my primary school, there was a custom that we took baskets of fruit round and as part of the Harvest Festival to needy old people in the neighbourhood. So I sort of said, I know a very needy old person in my neighbourhood, and she's this very old writer, Eleanor Fargen. And I'd found out where she lived, and I think she was tickled pink when I sort of appeared on her doorstep with this basket of harvest goodies.
Julia's friendship with Eleanor Fargen inspired her to develop her writing skills and some years later to move into a songwriting career.
My first actual sort of writing that I made a living from was writing songs. I used to write lots of songs for children's television. That was quite funny, actually, because the producers would phone me up and they'd say, "Oh, Julia, we're in a panic. We need one song about horrible smells and one song about silly slippers by Wednesday week." And I'd sort of get out my book and notebook and brainstorm on smells and slippers and then go to the piano and tinkle away. And, I'd always meet my deadlines. And then one day, just out of the blue, I got a phone call. And this time, instead of being from, a BBC person asking me to write a song, it was from a publisher asking if they could make the words of A Squash and a Squeeze into a book. So I acted very cool, as if this sort of thing happened every day. I sort of said, yes, I think that would be permissible. I'd need to read the small print sort of thing. And then I put down the phone, and then I was just leaping about the room with excitement. I never met Axel till after our first book, A Squash and a Squeeze, was published. What happens, and this is general, generally happens with most authors, the publisher finds the illustrator and puts you together. Down here's my very favourite drawer. This is just labelled Axel, and it's all Axel's letters to me, or rather the envelopes, because he always draws a picture. This one is a giant snail giving a ride to a tiny little whale, which is the other way around from in the book. This one, when we won the Blue Peter Award for Room on the Broom.
There's a little mouse.
Oh, it's a cute
Its shape always varies a little bit. Sometimes it's slimmer, sometimes it's a little bit chubby.
But I was dying to write another non-educational book that would be in the bookshops. And eventually I wrote this tale of the Gruffalo, and I was thinking, don't think this is very good. But actually that was the one that did take off in a huge way. I created the Gruffalo because lots of things rhyme with O. I had the line in my mind, silly old fox, doesn't he know there's no such thing as a O? So this creature had to end in O. I thought if you started grrr, that's quite fierce sounding. So Gruffalo sprang to mind. Today, for the first time, I visited a school for deaf children, and it was very, very interesting. Oh, I think you're very wise not to touch this poisonous wart. You don't want to get poisoned. Okay.
At St Vincent's School, Julia shares some of her stories with children and teachers.
Well, if that's the case, we'll soon discover her hiding place. He has terrible tusks. That's where you touch the tusks. And terrible claws.
I like the Gruffalo book. I like the one over there.
I like the elephant and the snake, the way it slithered along.
It's Gruffalo's birthday. He is 10. 10? I like him.
A book doesn't usually come to me all in one piece. So for a long time I'd had an idea about a fairy who just muddles up wishes and gets the wishes wrong. And then I thought, well, why does she muddle them up? Is she just absent-minded? And then actually, I think one of my sons said to me, well, Mum, you know, you sometimes don't hear what I'm saying because I haven't got brilliant hearing. Why don't you make the fairy be deaf? And I thought, well, that's a really good idea. In Freddie and the Fairy, Freddie rescues a fairy who's got stuck in a tree, and as a reward, she says she'll grant him all his wishes. But he's this annoying child who just mumbles and covers up his mouth, and she's got this, you know, hearing loss. So she just gets his wishes muddled up. I think it was when I was in my 20s probably that I became aware I hadn't got perfect hearing. And I had some tests done, and it's kind of an inner ear deafness, the same in both ears. No one really knows why, and it's I'm lucky it's just a mild hearing loss, but despite that, it is a problem for me. It's very frustrating when you say, please could you speak nice and loud and clear, I haven't got very good hearing, and people start off, oh, all right, sorry, I will speak loud and clear, and then they get softer and softer, and then they start to mumble. And so actually this book, the new story that I've written, Freddie and the Fairy, it's a bit of a lecture to those mumblers. When I visit schools and the children ask questions, you know, sometimes they have such tiny little voices, or they say their names, you don't hear their names. So my way around that is I get a chair next to mine and I say, this is the question chair. And that makes it actually more interesting for the children. So the child with the question will come and sit next to me and I say, ask your question in a big loud voice, and so everyone can hear. And it makes it more theatrical, and it means I can hear the questions as well.